Hello, my name is Blair Brown. I'm a business major at Dutchess Community College, and I'm going to be going over the forms of legal businesses. Now, at some point in your life, you might have had the thought of starting your very own business and becoming an entrepreneur. Well, don't worry because you're not alone, and many others have had the same exact thought, including myself. But you may be wondering what exactly is an entrepreneur and what are the different types of businesses out there. So, for this video, I'm going to explain the different forms of businesses, the legal details associated with each one, and then I'm going to go over the pros and cons of each one. All right? Okay. So the three major forms of businesses are a sole proprietorship, a partnership, and a corporation. But before I explain those further, I want to discuss some key terms that I will be using for this video. Okay, so entrepreneurship, individuals who operate a business with the intention of growth. All right. And I just want to point out because entrepreneurship is a big buzzword, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to highlight the difference between entrepreneurship and micropreneurship. So, entrepreneurship focuses on growth, they want their business to scale large, whereas a micropreneurship is individuals who operate a business with the intention of keeping the business small. These are like your local vending machine owners, these are people who bake and sell locally, okay, to people in their area. They wouldn't necessarily want their business to grow too large to where they can't manage it on their own anymore. All right. So entrepreneurship growth, micropreneurship small. Common stock, a stake in ownership in a company, same as an ordinary share in which the individual holding a share will receive dividends. So when a company starts, they will sometimes issue out shares, which are just to the public, and which the public can buy a share. And when you do that, they have a percentage of that business. They become shareholders. All right. So when the business as a whole grows, the shareholders will also receive a dividend, which is like a percentage of the profit. Okay. Preferred stock, a class of stock with more predictable outcome. Okay. This is just like a common stock, only that um, a preferred stock is going to be less risky, less volatile. It's more it's more how you say straightforward. But it's not exactly a bond like you would get from a bank because a bond from the bank is guaranteed money. When you buy a bond, you are guaranteed that money back. Where preferred stock, you are still taking a risk. Okay. Co-op, a structure in a business where ownership comes from those who use the business. Now, a co-op is considered a member-shared business and isn't exactly a form of business I'm going to go over too much, but it's an autonomous association of people who jointly own a business and is equally controlled by its members. So, for an example, you could look at a grocery store as a co-op, except the members who would stock the shelves are most likely going to also be the ones who are running the register, and then they're also going to be have the store only available to the members. So it's by the members for the members. Liability of owners. When I mean that, there's a term called unlimited liability. So that's looked at as a negative thing because there are legal actions that can be taken against the business that would fall onto the owners of the business. A business can become its own legal entity depending on which form of business you choose. So when I say unlimited liability, that means anything that happens to the business also happens to the people who own the business. When I say limited liability, that is a positive thing because everything does not fall onto the individuals who run it. Management. Who controls the part of the business? Okay, so just because you start a business does not necessarily mean you are going to be the one that's running it. And we'll see examples of that further on. And then termination, when a business must come to an end. Now, I'm not talking about like an employee's terminating from their position at a job. I'm speaking of when the business has to come to an end, when the business must terminate. All right, moving forward. Sole proprietorship is the first form of business. Now, there's no legal status, there's one owner, there's unlimited liabilities. The owner of property is owned by the sole proprietor. Management is managed by the sole proprietor, and termination occurs on the owner's death or it's blocked off a little bit, but it's at the owner's choice. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward form of business. You know, everything that happens to the business happens to the owner. So if you're the sole proprietor, whatever happens to that business happens to you. Your money is the business's money, vice versa. Okay. Now, 72% of businesses are run are a sole proprietorship. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. And if you ever are discouraged, know that majority of businesses start off as sole proprietors. Okay, so pro cons. A sole proprietorship is easy to start up and easy to dissolve. There's low organizational cost. There's minimal regulations. It's you maintain complete and ultimate control of the business, and you are also entitled to all the profits. All right. Some cons are unlimited liability, limited fundraising. You have to be knowledgeable in running a business by yourself, and then the firm is also terminated once the sole proprietor dies. All right. Next form of business is a partnership. Now, there's no legal status. There has to be a minimum of 2 people owning the business and a max of 20. The liabilities of the owner are unlimited. Management is every partner is entitled to participate. So each person who started the business, who's the owner, has equal say and equal parts in that partnership. Okay. And termination happens when any one of the partners becomes bankrupt or mentally ill. So this is very similar to a sole proprietorship. It's just that you have more people with you. Now, types of partnerships. We have a general partnership, which all partners have unlimited liability. Okay, so this is going to be the majority of partnerships, and this is what you're mainly going to think of when you think of partnership. All right, then there's limited partnership. One or more general partners who have unlimited liability. One or more limited partners whose liability is limited to the amount of money they invest in the business. Okay, so this is basically talking about like a small hierarchy within that partnership where you have maybe 1 or 2 guys who are at the head and they'll take more blame, more responsibility for the business. They might probably have more say in the business, but at the same time, they're probably also going to be taking a larger amount of profits. Okay, and the people who aren't at the head, they have the benefit of having limited liability. Okay, and then you have an LLC or a limited liability company. And this is a business structure which is a combination of a corporation and partnership. The owners have limited liability, but the firm runs and is taxed like a partnership. Okay, so this is a nice blend of a partnership and a corporation. Okay, you get to enjoy best of both worlds. You get to be taxed one time, right? Just like how a partnership and a sole proprietor would be, but then you have limited liability. So you aren't responsible for everything that happens within the business. It's pretty great, and it's one of my favorite forms of businesses. All right, so pros and cons. It's easier to manage compared to a corporation. It can raise more funds compared to a sole proprietorship. It permits some of the partners of the it promotes. Okay, so a limited partnership permits some of the partners the privilege of a limited liability, like we talked about. And for cons, we have unlimited liabilities. Each partner is liable for the actions of the other partners. Difficulty of partner transferability, and it's terminated upon a partner's death. Okay, so if one person in the partnership ends up passing, the whole business is most likely to be terminated from there. All right, now we're going to move on to the last form of business, which is a corporation. Now, a corporation is its own separate legal entity, and this is the big thing for corporations. Okay, so the owner of a private corporation has a minimum of 2 people and a max of 50. And then a public corporation has a minimum of 2 people and it has no max. You can have as many people in the corporation as happens, as shareholders and etc. Okay, so the liabilities of owner is limited to the amount of shares subscribed by its shareholders. Ownership of property is owned by the company. Again, a corporation is its own separate legal entity, meaning that the business can own property. Management is managed by a board of directors, and termination is by undergoing legal windup, and it is perpetual succession unless the company is liquidated. All right, so termination for a corporation is a huge process. Legal winding up is basically just um, the process in which everything is becoming liquidated. So when we're thinking of corporations, we want to think of like things like Disney, Apple, Starbucks, McDonald's. Like these are multinational corporations that are huge. They're their own thing. Their logos are like a person that exists. They can own property and so forth. So for termination of like one of these things, one of these companies would have to you'd have to basically like sell everything. So that means not just like the inventory and the buildings, but also the property and land, and it has to be evenly spread out to all of the shareholders. And this is something that's most likely going to never happen. Okay, corporations like Walmart, Disney, these things are going to probably be around forever. All right. So there's a few different types of corporations also. So public listed company (PLC). Shares are openly sold to the public. Shares are traded on stock exchange, also known as an incorporation. These are like the corporations I named. Okay. Private limited company or LTD. Shares are sold to the selected group of investors. Shares are not traded on stock exchange. Okay. So PLCs and TLDs differ in the way that shares are sold. So one is publicly sold. You can download a brokerage app or go and find somewhere where you can buy shares of Apple, and all these other big names, like right now. Whereas a private company, you're not able to access shares for those companies. But the more common one is a PLC. And then within either of these, they can be either a C corporation or an S corporation. Okay, so a C corporation is a conventional style company, hence where you get the C from. It gets double taxed. Whereas an S corporation or S corp is generally used for smaller businesses, and it uses subchapter S, hence where it gets the name S corp from, of the IRS tax code. So there's no double taxation. All right, so you might be thinking now, isn't an S corporation the same as a LLC? Well, not exactly. Okay, so S corporations are more uncommon and they differ from LLCs in that S corporations have to have no more than 100 shareholders. Also, LLCs can involve non US residents as shareholders. Okay, so these are just little minor details, but generally when you're thinking about corporations, it's a PLC and it's a C corp. Okay, so some pros and cons for corporations is that there's limited liabilities, which this is the big thing right here. This is the big reason why corporations are superior. Easy to raise capital. Corporations will continue after the death of each owner. Ease of transferability, and it's managed by a professional most times. Some cons are that it's complicated to form, and you might need a professional to help you. There's high organizational costs, and meaning that there's big running costs and upkeeps for that corporation. There's more strict regulations, and with more strict regulations comes a lack of secrecy. Okay, so again, limited liabilities, biggest benefit of a corporation, and big corporations are often mimicked by smaller forms of businesses, which makes it much easier for competitors to leech off of ideas. That's why you see a bunch of knockoff of big name brand stuff. Okay, so these are all the different forms of businesses, and here is a list of all the references I used. But thank you for watching, and I appreciate your time.